All right, so for today's example, we're going to continue to look at multi-page spreads. Last class on Monday, we looked at the idea of using master pages, okay? We're going to continue to look at them. We're going to look at them in more detail today, and we'll talk about how they become so effective and so important, okay? So I'm going to start out by going over to Document. And this is going to be where you're going to have to make that decision on what is going to be the size of my portfolio, okay? And I recommend you put some thought into this before starting to assemble, because if you spend 3 days assembling it and you realize that it's not the right size, you know, you're going to ultimately, the size affects the entire layout and how it all works. So give it a little thought. I'd recommend probably for your first one to stick to 8.5 by 11. You can see about how that looks. And you know, when you actually open it up, it looks pretty good. You have a nice rectilinear landscape format to work with. So 8.5 by 11 is good. I also get a lot of squares, like 10 by 10. Also a good, actually one of my favorites. Mine in school was 10 by 10 for a while. 10 by 10 works because you can print it out on 11 by 17 paper and be able to cut it out. So think about, even though if you were to make an odd shape, how will they actually print it? Okay, they don't make paper sizes for everything that you can think of. They will start with a typical paper size and have to create it. So 10 by 10, it probably will cost you a little bit more money because they have to use a larger sheet of paper to ultimately create it. Even though they're only using, you know, this much of a piece of paper that is that big, you're paying for the whole paper. So, I mean, ultimately it's probably nickels and dimes at the end of the day to what the overall thing costs, but just something to think about. So I'm going to choose letter size. I'm going to leave the facing pages button checked. I am then going to click on landscape. No need to alter any of this. So the letter preset already works. And I'm also going to change my margins to 0. Oops, sorry, too quick. Let's try that again. One more thing to show you. So this looks good, facing pages, letter, landscape. Let's change our margins to 0. Something that we didn't talk about today in the lecture that's important for something like this. Does anyone know what the idea of bleed is in printing? Maybe I just briefly talked about it. It's, you know, you were asking, how do you print to the edge of the page? Well, one of the things that you can do to help do that is we're going to implement a bleed, which is actually over-designing over the edge of the paper. What that allows them to do is, or what it actually helps more of the printer in creating that full page layout, but it allows your imagery and whatnot to flow off the edge of the page. So to be able to set that up, we're going to click on More Options. And then down here at the very bottom, I'm going to change my top to 1/8 of an inch bleed. Okay, the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to uncheck the link here, and I'm just going to make the inside bleed 0. Okay, so that's going to be the crease right here at the middle. So that ultimately doesn't matter, but we're going to set up a bleed for all the way around the other side. Okay, so from there, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right, and we can see here on page 1 that the pink line represents our 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, whereas the red line above represents our bleed. So we're actually going to design to the red line, okay? So that another thing that it also helps out for is when you're printing, it helps resolve printer error a little bit. Sometimes, you know, when you're printing 30, 40, 50, 60 sheets, or if you're printing paper all day long, it's very, you know, it's possible that the page could skew a little bit in that printer. So if it does shift over 1/8 of an inch, you know, you compensate for that by creating this bleed. Okay, so let's also change our rulers to inches. Okay, so this first page, if we click on pages, represents our cover sheet. Okay, and then we are going to add a couple more sheets in just a second. But for a little bit, let's focus on the A master sheet. I know we talked about it a little bit last class, but we're gonna really feel its power and its importance today. So I'm gonna double click on A master. So if I zoom out a little bit, you'll notice that we have a spread of both a left and a right page. And if we look back to what we talked about last class, what the master slides do is it allows you to organize the overall layout and all of that content that you know is going to remain consistent from page to page to page, whether it be that maybe that little symbol in the top left-hand corner and the top right-hand corner, maybe it be page numbers, whatever that consistent element is from sheet to sheet to sheet. This is a great opportunity to do that, along with like grid lines and things of that nature. Okay, so let's start to add a few of those elements. Okay, and notice as I add some of those elements, you'll notice how they start to reflect on the next sheet. Okay, and if you look at page 1, you'll notice that it says A in the upper right-hand corner. What that's referring to is that sheet 1 or page 1 will ultimately reflect what is on the A master. And then in a few minutes, we're going to learn how to create a B master, C master, etc., so that you can use multiple templates that you might use throughout your portfolio. Okay, so let's first start by, let's go ahead and click on our layers. We're going to do the same thing we did last class. Let's create layer 1 as our guides. So I'm just going to create just this one, guides. Okay, and I'm going to uncheck the print layer option. Okay, and this is going to be where we set up our guides. So I'm going to do relatively easy guides this time. I'm not going to do the whole golden ratio thing again, but we'll practice with the 3/4 quarter rule that we saw in a lot of the portfolio examples today. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in a few of those guidelines. Remember that if we go over to our rulers on the left-hand side and we click down, we'll get a grid line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in at, so our sheet, this particular page is 8.5 by 11, so it's going to be at 5.5 inches. Okay, so notice that right there where my cursor is, it says 5.5 right there. So I know that that is right in the middle of the page. See right there, it says X in that little gray box that says 5.5 inches. So I know that's where I want it to be. I'm going to put the exact same thing on the other side. All right, and that's going to be, let's see, 8.5 plus 5.5, 9, so that's going to be 16 and a half. So there we have one more right there. So we have two grid lines separating the middle of each page. The reason why I put one on each side is that it allows me to see what 3/4 might look like on this side, and 3/4 could also be the same right here. Okay. What proportion you guys decide to use is up to you. If you want to do 2/3, 1/3, by all means. Okay. But for simplicity, we'll go ahead and just use the 1/4, 3/4 rule. Okay, so for my first master slide, I am going to take my rectilinear frame tool, and I'm going to start by placing, actually, sorry, let me go back one more step. I'm going to place a couple more grid lines. I'm going to put one at about 1/4 of an inch. About right. Yeah, about right. No, that's 1 inch. I'll do 1 inch. Okay, that should be good. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. All right. So my first image, I am going to place over here on. I'm going to do a nice 3/4 spread full-size image. So I'm going to place a frame from the outer side of my bleed. Okay, right here. Not the edge of my paper, but the outer side of my bleed. Okay, so that. So I'll start that. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to fill in that frame right down to the edge so that it aligns with that grid line that I just created. Okay, see how we did that? So now, if I go over to pages, all right, right now we're working on the A master, and if I go over to the first page, notice that because it says A master, I see that frame in those grid lines that I just created. Okay, if I add 2 pages, if I add the next sheet, you'll notice that I have that exact same layout or that frame that I created from my A master. Okay, so let's keep going on that master and let's add some more content, and then we'll look at how to create additional ones as well. Okay, so one thing that doesn't work the greatest on master slides is text. So it's kind of it's not the most well thought out thing for InDesign, but as you can see, if I go over to page 2 and 3, I can't select any of those items. Those are embedded into my spread, okay? Because these are all from my master sheet. If I want to make edits to my overall layout and my content, I need to go back to my master sheet and make the edits from there, and I'll see that from spread to spread to spread to spread, okay? So let's add just a little bit of content, and let's see how we might continue to add more stuff. So I am going to add a text box, and I'm going to add that text box right here. Okay, I'm going to let it go to the edge of the page. I'll keep it relatively simple. Let's call this project, let's call it the Mondrian Museum. I know you guys are probably familiar with that. So Mondrian, did I spell that right? Mondrian Museum. Okay, so we have Mondrian Museum. I am going to, let's make that like, that's way too big. Let's make that like 36. Let's change this to Arial. I'm just going to type in A. So I'll go to Arial. Arial works well. It's a nice contemporary. It's still contemporary. It's still highly used. If whenever in doubt, Arial works great. Okay. So Mondrian Museum. I'm going to give that a title. Okay. I'm going to align it with my grid that I created initially, okay? Because I want that, if I'm going to create titles and headings throughout my other pages, I want that to remain consistent from sheet to sheet to sheet to sheet, okay? And then let's go ahead and copy, Control C, Control V. I'm going to copy that just below, and I'm going to go ahead and add some text filler, which works great. So I'm going to type in Latin text filler, okay? When you guys are creating your first couple slides for the exercise today, this is a great option so that you don't necessarily have to choose what you're going to write right now, but you can focus more on the layout and the content, and then as you continue to develop the portfolio, you can go through and actually type in your own content. Okay, so let's change this to maybe 10. All right, I'm going to paste that in. All right, and that works pretty good. So here we have a title. We also have a full page, a nice page and a half size spread for my next pages. So if I go over here to my first and second and third slide, you'll notice that we have that text. The only problem is I can't edit that text, okay? So, which is kind of a bummer. But one way that you can actually get around that is if you go over to, say, one of your slides here, I can right-click on that slide, and I'm going to click on the button that says Override All Master Page Items. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to edit that content. Okay, the only downfall is that you've now basically turned off that master slide. If I go up here and I make some changes to that master slide, it's not going to continue to affect it. So there's pros and cons of going this route. Okay.
It doesn't, like if that's a linked text, it doesn't go back and revise the linked text, does it?
It will. Yes, it will. So another thing to keep in mind. So I can now edit that text if I want to. Actually, I don't think this is actually linked now. Let me just text this, or let me just test it. Now that I've overridden the master items, I don't think it will ultimately change. Let's change this to bold. Let's just do a quick test. Yeah, that actually did not change it. So as soon as you override the master, you no longer have, you've now lost that link. So another really good option that you might want to do when you're doing text is the paste in place option. Okay, so you might do something like this. You might create it in your first page, and you might go over and go I'm going to hold down Shift, select both of these pieces of text. I'm going to do Control C or right click and go to copy, and then I might go to my first page spread up here, and I'm going to click on page 1, and I'm going to right click and click on paste in place. So now that text will be in that exact same spot. Ideally, I don't like to have my text on my master slide. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this text, but I am going to leave my frame that I created. Okay, the nice thing about the frame is if I go down to page 2 and 3, I can actually use that frame. The frame is a live item that I can continue to use. So I'm going to click on page 2, and I'm going to click on File, Place, and let's find a nice image here. I actually downloaded some images of some models, wood models. So 7B, example imagery. Let's just try this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on Open, and notice that it is now a little thumbnail that moves around with my mouse. If I go over and I click on that frame that I just created, it will fill it into that frame that is on my master slide. Okay, and then from there I can right click, fitting, fill frame proportionally. Okay, so that image now encapsulates that frame that I created on that master slide. Okay, I can still double click on it, I can move it around just like I would as if I created the frame for this particular slide. Okay, and again, maybe I don't want this this title right here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to click on page 3 up here, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do paste in place. Paste in place. Okay, maybe I give myself a little bit of room. Okay, so that's one option. So let's take this a step further. I'm going to go up to my A master, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with my A master selected, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit Create New Page, and notice that it just created a B master. Okay, so now we have a B master. I'm going to copy over these same grid lines. So I'm holding down Shift. I'm going to select all of my grid lines. Okay, copy, B master, paste in place. So there are the same exact grid lines on my second master. But this time, I'm going to fill that image from this side. Okay, so now I have that full page image on the right side versus the left. Okay, so now I have two different masters to work with. So I'm going to go back to page 3 here, and I'm going to add 2 more slides. Okay, notice that on this slide it still says A and A, so I'm using the A master. If I right click on that sheet, I can click on where'd it go? Apply master pages. Okay, so I click on apply master pages, and then right here I'm going to click on B master. Okay, to pages 3 and 4, and I'm going to hit OK. Actually, I didn't do it to my other one. Let's do it to this one. So I'm going to click on apply master to pages, B master, OK. So now notice that it says A. Oh, I see what I did. I hit the wrong page number. Okay, so now notice that it says A, B, B. Okay, so I have 2 different masters going, and now if I look at page 3 and 4, I have my secondary setup that I created. So ideally, when you're going through the process of creating a portfolio, you're probably going to want something like 2 to 4 masters. Okay, you might have a simpler spread where it's just one big image like this with a little bit of text along with some of your other supportive content. You might have something that's a little bit more complex. But the idea is that you can create these basic setups, and all you got to do is just select the master that you want and kind of fill in the missing pieces. Okay, so that you're not kind of guessing on every single sheet on how the content is going to, start to come together. You're creating the templates and you're just applying them from sheet to sheet. Okay, so we might go up to B master. I'm going to add a C master now. Okay, I'm going to right click, paste in place. There's my same grid lines. And then from here, I might take it a step further. Okay, maybe we have, I'm going to move this down to this side. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Let's make it the same size. Let's keep that consistent. So about like that. And then from here, I'm going to do maybe a full size spread on this side over to my bleed. Okay, I'm going to put that right there at the binding. Over here, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Maybe I do a frame right here at the edge, and then maybe I split this in half with another image. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so here we have a nice full page image, and then we have 3 images that are broken down into kind of this broken down grid. Okay, and then from there, maybe I want to add a little bit of spacing in between, so when I start to add my images, that they don't butt up right up against each other. Remember last class we looked at the Align tool. So if I go over to Window and I click on Objects and Layout, I can go to Align. I'm going to select both of these frames. I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to make that my keyframe because I actually don't want that one to move. I want it to remain stationary. And then I am going to say I want a nice 1/8 of an inch spacing between these 2 objects. And I'm going to click on the Distribute Horizontal. Okay, notice that it just added a 1 inch or 1/8 of an inch spacing between those 2 images. Okay, and I can do the same thing over here. I'm going to click on this one and this one. I'm going to make this one my stationary, whoops, my keyframe. So 1, 2, make that my keyframe, and I'm going to apply the vertical distribute spacing, and now I have that nice perfect 1/8 of an inch spacing between all 3 frames. Okay, I'm just going to adjust it just slightly. Okay. Okay, so there we have 3 different frames. We have 1 frame over here. I'm going to go to page 4 and 5, and let's make this our new C master. So I'm going to right click, apply master to pages. I'm going to go ahead and make that the C master. Okay, apply master to pages. I'm going to make the C master, and there's our new layout. Okay, so from there, go to File, Place, and I can start to add my content.
I stumbled upon the master part of that box. You can just highlight one of the pages on the master.
Oh, up here?
And, no, about the next one about, okay, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Click on it, no, further, one more, there.
Uh-huh.
Click on that. Okay, then drag it down to page 4 or 5.
Oh, yes, that's another option. So you just drag the master onto your sheet and it will apply it. Okay? So I'm going to click on that frame that I just created. All right, let's go ahead and fill this in. So fitting, fill frame proportionally. Maybe that's our first image. And I'm just kind of throwing in random images here. Okay, let's center that a little bit. Okay, File, Place. Oops. Okay, so you guys can kind of see how this is starting to come along. Fitting, fill content proportionally. Okay, some of the framing is a little goofy. Something to keep in mind is that you are going to have a binding, okay? If you look at all of these portfolios right here, you'll notice that probably most of the people take like the FedEx Kinko's route, okay? And that's fine. I'm not going to judge anybody based on the type of binding that you choose. Obviously, the more money you spend on it, the better it will look, but we all have our limitations, okay? But no matter what binding you pick, whether it be spiral or it be edge bound, glue bound, whatever it might be, you're always going to have a binding here in the middle, okay? So keep that in mind when you're placing your images. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have an image span through the binding, but you want to make sure that the content that you are displaying, the important content, isn't right on that binding, okay? So over here, yeah, this probably isn't the most important part right here. If you wanted to create a little boundary, you could do that. You can make your frames a little smaller. You could place a rectilinear box over here in the middle, maybe where that becomes white. Okay, so I'm going to fill that in with white. None. Okay, so that's an option as well. There's probably about 4 ways that you can do that, but just keep in mind that you will have a binding. Okay, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to select that text that I just created, copy it, and I'm going to paste it down here. Okay, the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to keep it consistent. If I'm going to add text, keep the consistent size, the consistent fonts, etc. throughout the entire piece. So maybe we put Mondrian Museum there. We have less text. Maybe we change this to, Bayview House. Okay, so that might be a slide in your portfolio as well. Okay, one more thing before I cut you guys loose. Going back to master pages, I'm going to go back to my A master and I'm going to show you guys how to create page numbers. Okay, you'll see in a lot of these examples that people use page numbers. Well, you can probably, if you think about it, it gets very tedious of going through and adding a page number to every single sheet. And then maybe you move a page around, you decide to flip-flop them a little bit, well then you're going through and you're changing all your sheet numbers and it becomes exhausting. So there's actually a really nice little tool for this in InDesign. So let me go back and get that text. I'm going to borrow that same text. I'm going to go back to my master sheet. And I am just going to keep it kind of simple. I'm going to type in page. And I know you can't see this right now. I'll fix it. I'm going to call this page 1. Okay, I'm going to call that page 1. Actually, I'm just going to call this page for now. Okay, I'm going to put this maybe in my lower right-hand corner. Okay, so that's page 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click inside that page, okay, just like so. I'm going to go up to where it says type. I'm going to go down to where it says insert special character over to, let's see, markers. All right, so you're going to go over to insert special character, markers, and then current page number. Okay. Actually, sorry, I did something wrong. You want to put in, sorry, I know what I did wrong. Okay, so I'm going to select that X that I just created here. You can put an X, you could put 1, it doesn't matter because it's going to change it in just a second. I'm going to select that number, go through the same process, type, insert special character, markers, current page number. Why is that going away? Oh, there it is. It was actually adding it multiple times. Okay, it actually just went beyond the frame, but it was there. Okay, so now that it says page A, notice that, you little bugger. Okay, so we have page A, and now if you notice that if you go over to page 1, notice that it says page 1. If I go over to page 2, actually if I go to page 3, because I don't have it on page 2 yet, you'll notice that it says page 3. Okay. And we don't have it down here because I haven't added it to those different masters. Okay, I'll show you guys how to do that though. But the nice thing about that is if you guys can rearrange your pages however you want, and it will continue to update the page number accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to my master and I'm going to copy page A, and I am going to copy it over here. I'm going to put it on this side. And I'm going to do the same thing. Copy it, and I'm going to bring it down to the B master. Oops, let's do this. Paste in place. There we go. Notice that it says page B over here on the other side. Let's go to my C master. Paste in place. Page C. Okay, so now page 1. I didn't add it to that side, but page 3, page 4, and page 5, it's just actually hidden behind the picture. Okay, so what's nice about it though is if I can move this up, I decide to switch them around, notice that it changes the page numbers accordingly. So that becomes a really helpful tool. Okay, so that's it. That's what we're going to stop out for today. That should give you a lot of the, or at least a majority of the tools that you need to start to create a really nice portfolio. So what you should work on today is start to develop these different page layout concepts. So you can start by just creating simple frames. Okay, you don't necessarily need to add content unless you're ready to do that. It will actually take time to develop content. For this class, a lot of you guys may not have a ton of content. You may only have what you've done in this class. So I think it'll tell you in the exercise prompt to use some of the elements that you've created for the exercises in assignment 1 and assignment 2. If you have other classes that you guys have done work for, by all means use that too, okay? Because once you actually get to the final portfolio, it's gonna say to use 4 examples from this class, and it'll say to use like 2 or 3 examples from outside sources, whether it be other classes or maybe other hobbies that you might have outside of class, okay? So start to develop those layouts. I'll walk around, I'll talk to you guys. If you have questions, let me know. I'll also be grading your assignment 2s. Any questions? Anything at all? I can tell we're all super excited to get going on this.
I was struggling on the assignment yesterday.